Howdy, it's Doc Moses again with the rifles series of our Economical Cowboys. So the rifles, there seems to be a lot. There seems to be a little more difference. Like I said, most everybody's shooting a Colt single action look-alike in the handgun category, but the rifles we do see a little bit more. So we'll start off with the 1892. That's probably the strongest and just the best overall rifle as a rifle in our sport. It's the least expensive. The Rossi version of the 1892 Winchester uh, comes out of the box. It works great. It's a little bit rough out of the box. You wouldn't want to shoot it in competition right away. You'd want to work on it. But there are some videos by Nate Cowboy Jones, or you can send it to him specifically, and they work. I bought a 92 as my first rifle, and it was super clean. In fact, I just sold it a couple of weeks ago. I'd show it to you in this episode and loved it. Wish I could have kept it, but I'm economical. I wasn't using it, so I got rid of it. That's part of the deal. Fantastic gun, super strong. You're not going to blow it up. You can take it out hunting. You can take it into our sport. The 1892 is a top eject Winchester. All the Winchesters are top eject, which when I wasn't doing this sport really bugged me. It's like, why not side eject like the Marlin? That makes so much more sense. And it does, but there's just something fun about, man, those rounds coming over your head and hitting your hat and everything. So the first time I shot that 92, I got it. It's like, okay, that's why we do this. So really good rifle. It does tend to be a little slow, but you can fix that by picking the categories wisely. There is a category that's only open to 92s and 94s, and that's a B Western. And I did that for a couple of years, and so everybody's shooting about that way. Now there are some guys who shoot the 92s insanely fast. I don't know how they do it, and it doesn't feel slower, but it just is. When I came home with my first 73, I was doing a dry fire match in my practice area, no bullets, just dry firing. And when I timed the 6 stages, I averaged 3 seconds faster on the 74. Oh, excuse me, the 73, which I'd never shot before. So 1892, great gun, the least expensive. You can get the Rossi version, you can get a Winchester version, and you can get a Browning version. When I was a 20-something, I was trying to decide what to buy. I really wanted to get one of these. Wasn't doing cowboy action. I didn't start that till I was almost 3 years ago, mid-50s. I remember going to the store and picking up the Rossi, and it worked, but it was it was hard action. Then the Winchester was a lot smoother. It still had some clunks, but it looked great, looked better. The wood was a little bit nicer. And then the Browning was right next to it in the rack. You could get to them all. You didn't have to ask anyone to help you. And it was like butter right off the shelf. Just wow. And they're all the same thing, chambered in 357 or 44. And couldn't decide what to do. And there was like $200 difference in each of them's price. So the Rossi, and then 200 more for the Winchester, 200 more for the Browning. Finally decided just to go and buy the Rossi, and went to the store, and they were all sold out. They'd had like 6 of each, but I paddled around. So then I thought, well, I'll get something else when they come back. I'll get one, and then waited a few months, and then you're having babies and all that. So never happened. But that is the difference right out of the box. The Browning was ready to go. Now here's the thing about this, and you're going to catch this on the wire. Browning didn't actually make the 1892. It was made by a Japanese company under licensed by Browning. I believe it was by Maruku, who is also the company that makes the licensed Winchesters now. So if you buy a Winchester, I think they shut their Connecticut plant in the early 2000s. And then there's people talk about a pre-63 Winchester. I don't know what happened in 63, but that's when I was born. So really, the Japanese Maruku is that rifle, and it's great. It's a great gun straight out of the box. It does cost literally a little more than twice as much as the Rossi. And with that almost $0 upgrade where you just get the video and you polish a few parts, takes about, I'm told, about 2.5 hours. The Rossi shoots as good as the Maruku. And you can get parts for it. There's a thread going on right now as I'm filming this about a guy who broke a part on his Maruku, and he can't get a replacement for it. They won't sell it. So you do have to watch things like that. So that's the Rossi. And then 1892, we talked about the Winchester and the Browning are probably made at the same factory. Although you can get authentic, you know, Winchesters that were made here in the U.S. if you go back far enough. The next gun, and that's the most popular gun, is the 1873. The 1873, instead of having a bolt, like a bolt action, which the 92 does, it has these two little bolts that come up here. You can't see them; you can choose just the top of them, and so it really locks up tight. This used a set of toggle links, almost like links on a bicycle. There's two of them, and they're in here. And there's just something about this gun that's so fun in our game. I don't know why. I mean, I honestly can't explain it, but they're just really fun. So this is 1973. They cost more than the 92, and it's not as rugged a gun, but for our sport, it is the best gun, and it's the one that most people shoot when they can. Again, there's some guys who shoot 92s that are insanely fast, but they're rare. Now, people who shoot 92s are not rare. But who had that kind of speed. You know, people who they just like their 92 or they are in a category that's heavy on 92s. And so this is what that is. It kind of goes up like that. And they are made by Winchester. They're made by Maruku. But also, instead of the Rossi, there's an Italian company that makes it. That's Uberti. And almost everybody uses an Uberti because all the aftermarket parts are fitted to the Uberti. So they're all copies of the same firearm, but the parts are not interchangeable. So the 1873, it's a little bit heavier than the 92. Not quite as rugged, although, you know, this one is rated for 357. So you can take it out, shoot factory 357s in it. It won't hurt it any. I might not want to shoot a bunch of them. This is my other one that I got and why I sold the 92 because it's in 44 mag, which is what the 92 was in. And now here's the way I'm going to explain this, the way I think about it. They say, oh, you don't want to shoot magnums in those. If you're a handgun guy, you'll remember back in the 70s and 80s and the 60s, most police officers carried revolvers. In the 70s, they started carrying 357 magnums. Then they started having, one of the favorites was a Model 19 Smith & Wesson. It's a medium frame, K-frame. But if you feed those a lot of magnums, like, you know, every time you go to the range, you shoot 120 magnum rounds through it, and you go to the range every month, it begins to loosen up a little bit because it needs a little more meat on that frame. So they came out with the L frame in the late 80s, and that kind of fixed that issue. That's the way I think of these firearms. If you're just going to go and you're going to sight it in, shoot 25 magnums through it, and then take it out and go pig hunting, you're going to be fine. You do that again a couple months later, you're going to be fine. If you were going to shoot this in our matches where you're shooting 60 rounds, or if it's a big match, you're shooting 100, 120 rounds, you're going to multiple rounds every month, you know, 3 or 4 matches every month, then yeah, you would, first off, we don't allow magnums, but that kind of shooting would probably do it some harm. But it's rated for that. So if it's rated for 44 Magnum, you can shoot 44 Magnum, period. And people can gripe about that all they want. But you can't say you're rated for a Magnum if you can't take the power. Sometimes the modifications. This is an unmodified firearm. This is one I bought, and I've adjusted, but I've just done the adjustments that you can do with the tightening and loosening screws. This one I bought with a high round count as a basket case. And lots of parts missing and everything else, and fixed, and ended up sending to a gunsmith to really do some stuff on it. Sometimes the parts they'll put in can't take that magnum pressure power, so you got to be careful of that. But I did ask specifically, can I take this in the? I want to be sure when you fix it that it's something I could take into the brush if I wanted to, and use it as a magnum. Again, I'm not going to shoot it that way all the time. So the way he fixed it up. One of the things we talk about on modifications are short strokes. So this lever comes down to just under 90 degrees. It's got a short stroke in it. This one goes out to just past 90 degrees. So shorten it about that much, about 2.5 inches. You can also get these short strokes that are super short strokes, and they'll come out to about here. It's going to be about a 4.5 inch thing there, the minimum that SAS will allow. Now, I fired a couple of stages with one of those firearms when my ejector had flown off this one. And they shot great, and it was a smooth action, but it was a heavy action because you're doing the same amount of work that I'm doing with that stroke, or the same amount of work I'm doing with this stroke, with a stroke that's this big. So it's got to work harder in that shorter space. But you can still whip it back and forth, and that's what those guys who are super fast, almost are all using, is super short strokes, or at least a short stroke like in mine. So mine's kind of like a second generation stroke. So kind of know what you want with that. There's other modifications to do. They lighten springs and polish things and all of that in there. Sometimes they'll put on a wire spring instead of a leaf spring. These things do come from the factory way oversprung, but they do have adjustments. So this one is factory with me using the adjustments, and it's very similar with the exception of that trigger pull. It's a little bit harder trigger pull, but it's not a hard trigger pull by any means. It's just harder. And there's some lots of videos that you can watch. And what I did was to keep this factory, because I wanted to keep it factory when I made this video, was did the screws tightening and loosening that I could. Then in here on this, right here, this little nub, that was incredible. Let's get some background where you can see it. Yeah, there we go. That little nub, that's your lever safety. So if your lever's here, trigger won't pull. Here, trigger won't pull. Got to push that in, and now the trigger will pull. That was super irritating because, it was so tight it would push this lever out, So I got in there and was going to take it off. Thought, I'm going to take it off. It's like a wire spring. It's going to bend up this leg and then put it down, then bend up that leg. Pushed on it. Okay, not yet. Because I had the advantage of having this one that had been worked on sitting here. And so I just bent that spring until it felt like the one that had been worked on. And got a good little gun. The trigger is still, it's lighter than it was because I've used it a bunch. But I didn't actually do anything to lighten it other than turn this screw right under here that can affect that. So it's a pretty good shooting gun now. I'm pretty happy with it, especially since it doesn't have, $600 worth of work. But this is a Economical Cowboy, so I'm going to tell you about my mistake. First off, I bought the 92 because it was the least expensive rifle, and it was a great gun. The trouble is, most of us, when we shoot a 73, we fall in love with it. I didn't want to fall in love with the 73. The 92 is a better gun, and it's cheaper, and it's paid for. But I had to see what the hoopla was about, so I bought a basket case. No stock, no real sight. The action wouldn't function right 2 times in a row. Fixed a bunch of that myself. Couldn't get all of it fixed, and so I took it to Nate Cowboy Jones and got it back. So here's mistake number 1. I should have done what I've advised you guys to do, which is go with the guns you have and use 22 until you know what you want. Because you may try that 73 and go, dude, I got to have the 73. That's what happened to me, and I'm not a crowd pleaser. I do lots of things that don't meet the crowd. I'm a little silly, funny hat. I'm a Messianic Jew. That'll make Jews or Christians happy, So I'm good with going against the grain, but I just love the 73. Second thing it is, I bought this as a high count basket case, $600, because I thought I could fix it. Well, I probably could have fixed it if I'd gotten on the wire and asked for advice, but I didn't know you could do that then. But I was wrong, so I ended up spending as much as if I had just gone and bought a Taylor's tuned 73, brand new. And then it would have had the case hardened receiver, which I kind of like. Not everybody does, but I kind of like the case hardened look. So big mistake. Now this rifle is a great rifle. Now I wouldn't trade it with for anybody's 73. It's a chambered in 357. Then I have my favorite caliber over the 44 mag here. So I wouldn't trade it with anybody's, but that was a mistake. Even if I'd made the mistake of buying the 92 first, don't buy a gun thinking you're going to save money fixing it up. Because at least with these rifles, you're not going to. Again, I'm not a great mechanic with my hands or anything, but these aren't rocket science either. It's not working on modern car engine with all the computer parts. These are pretty basic, especially the 73, very basic. I couldn't do it, or I didn't do it. And what had happened, it had an out of battery discharge. We decided, and the lever was a little bent, and the little rod that's in there, I can't think what it's called now, was a little bent, but you couldn't see it visually. It was just bent just enough to keep it from working about 1 out of 3 times. It wouldn't function correctly. So he figured it out. So anyway, lost money because I should have just bought it new. And that's what I encourage you. You don't have to buy a brand new 73, but don't buy a basket case. Buy one that's functional. It's got a high round count, and they're going for $1,500 new. Don't pay $1,500 for it. Pay $11 or $12. It's a lot of money. And the saying was, I think I did it on the first video, BOCO, B-O-C-O, buy once, cry once. Yeah, that's what you should do. And then make sure you're in the right caliber. When I bought my 92, I was looking at a Moroku 44. And it got a little pricey, but I could have done it because I hadn't spent any money yet. And I decided not to. Had I done that, I'd probably still have that gun. I'd be pretty happy with it. I'd be a little nervous now when I just found out that Moroku will not send parts to repair guns. You have to send them to the factory, not even to another gunsmith. But they're great out of the box. So anyway, buy once, cry once. Now the other guns you're going to see a little bit of is going to look just like this one, only with a yellow receiver. And that's a 1866. It came before this one. This is an improved 1866. This one and the 1866 both have a side load where you can push the bullets in right here so you can fire a while and then load up without completely unloading. And I think they're the most beautiful rifle in CAS. However, they don't have the lever safety, which I think is huge because it keeps you from having the... or makes it more difficult to have an out of battery discharge. Not impossible, but and it's a little bit heavier because that brass is a little bit heavier than the steel. And because of that, they'll only chamber them in 38, 4440, things like that. But they won't chamber them in 357 or 44 Magnum. So the 66, a beautiful rifle. Again, I think it's the most beautiful in CAS, one of the prettiest rifles ever. And you'll see that when I get my 22s, but. Then you'll see an 1866. And 1866 looks just like this, except there's no wooden forend here. There's just that loading tube. This is the tube with the bullets in it. And it usually has a long barrel. These are 24 inches or more. This is a 20 inch. Actually, this is a carbine. This is the 357. Yeah, this is the 20 inch. And they'll look just like these. And it's got the gold receiver because it's also brass, but it does not have this side loader. It does not have that. And it doesn't have this either. Not a lot of guys shoot those. There's a little trick to how to work your hand around it the way when the bullets come through like that. And but a lot of people like those because they're so cool, and they really were 1860, invented and used in the Civil War. Good gun, expensive gun. But a good gun, and you will see those sometimes. But all three of those, the 1873, the 1866, and the 1860, all have the same internals. They have the toggle link action. It's just that each iteration, they got things a little better. With the 66, they got the side loader. With the 73, they made it out of steel instead of brass, and that is better. And then in the 92 is a completely different firearm, different designer and everything. So we're talking about these now. All these guns you can get in as Winchesters, authentic rifles from that era. You can get them as Ubertis, made in Italy. You can get the Morokus. By far, the Ubertis are the ones to get. Like I said, I bought this one brand new, and it was a good rifle, guys. Straight out of the box, I could have shot it. Now, like I said, I'm not fast or competitive, but it functioned perfectly. When I finally got it apart, the screws are insanely hard to get loose, and that's not an exaggeration. There wasn't any rust in it or any of those horror stories you hear. So a good rifle from the factory. I don't love the color of the wood, but I can fix that. And that's where all the aftermarket parts are for. You pay more for that. So this gun will cost about $400 less than a Moroku. And the Moroku, there's not aftermarket parts or very few for them. So with these, You can find all these incredible kits, like short stroke kits, like I mentioned, the ones like mine that go to about here. The the super short strokes that go to about there. So you can find all that. You can't with the Marukus. So the Marukus are great guns, but the Obertis are the way to go. Now, Henry Big Boys. Henry Big Boys are legal, but I've never seen anyone shoot one. They are probably, of all these guns I've talked about, if I were going to get a gun to go and take into the bush to go hunting with, and I'm not a big hunter, but had to go buy something new, I would probably buy a Big Boy. Great gun, great factory warranty. However, for our sport, they just don't work out very well, and no one's explained to me why they can't be sped up. And now they've started, traditionally the Big Boy, you always loaded from here, like on a 22, took off the end cap here and then put your bullets in, then put the end cap back on. But now, a couple of years ago, they started making a side loader version of it. So, again, I don't know why they say you can't speed these up, the Big Boys up, but they say you can't. And it's not just can you speed them up, but you can't shoot them as fast as we go, even with the stock action. No one's explained why that is, but being economical, don't make that mistake unless you just have to have a Big Boy, because it may not work for our game. That's another one that you'll see. Sometimes you will see a Lightning or a Lightning copy. That's where you pump it like this instead of working the lever. I think those are pretty cool looking. I've only seen one. Peter Soli, I think, is a company out of Italy that makes those. Now, and then the last one that's very popular is the Marlin 94. But don't confuse that with the Winchester 94. So in 1892, Winchester came out with their new rifle. They overlapped with the 73 for about 50 years because some people just like this one better. But eventually the 92 won the day and made it up until after World War II, I think. Not the big historian there. So Marlin, their competitor, said, well, we need to have a better lever gun that compete with this. So in 1894, they came out with one. And it is just as strong as the 92, but it has a side eject. So it's not flip them over your head. Makes a lot of sense. And I'm told that early in the CAS era, the 94s ruled the day because you can shoot a 94 and be Western, I believe, and they can go a little faster. Now, most of us aren't slowed down by our guns. Most of us are slowed down by our bodies. We just won't do it. We won't acquire the front sight quick enough. It's not even moving your hands, just acquiring that front sight so you'll pull the trigger. But for those few who do get fast enough, the 94 is just a little bit faster. And it can be worked on to make it a little more faster than that. With the 92, you can just smooth it out. You really can't shorten the stroke or anything. So the 94 is popular. The Winchester 94 is a different beast. It was made for rifle caliber. So pretend this receiver ends where my hand is. That's about the size of a 92. That's about what you're going to see. You see in most of the cowboy movies. 73 goes there, but they're about there. The 94 is a little bit longer receiver because it's made for longer bullets, like a 30-30 type bullet. And when you can get a 94 in a pistol caliber, like a 357 or something, they just don't function as well, I'm told. I don't have a 94. So don't get those confused. A Marlin 94, Winchester 94 for our sport, Winchester 92, Winchester or Henry 73, 66, 60. Those are the ones you want that most people end up wanting. So the most economical, the cheapest would be the 1892. It's a great rifle. You can't screw it up. Does have a little bit of a speed limit on it, I'm told. I never got that fast with it. And they're great guns and they cost less. The long-term smart move is if you can wait, is to get a 73 because that's probably the gun you're going to want. I mean, the vast majority of shooters are using a 73. There's style points for things like the 66 and the 60. And then there are those who just love their Marlins. Seen a couple of people shoot their Marlins, not a whole lot. Now, to close this video out, let's talk about 22s. There are Marlin 22s, a 39A. I had one of those. Never really liked it. Had it before I did SAS. Had to sell it to get the SAS guns because 22s weren't allowed back then. And I replaced it with a Henry. And I went ahead and paid a little extra and got the gold alloy Henry where the receiver is gold like this. Like I said, the 66 was so beautiful. So that's my beautiful gun. And I went ahead and bought the youth model Because why do you need a 20-inch barrel? It's a 22. Costs me less. This is economical. So the money I saved by getting the youth model, I put back into it and got that gold receiver. So when my grandkids get old enough, they'll have, Saba's gun will be the real pretty gun, and maybe they'll want to shoot it. Also, there are Rossi 22s. I like the cheek weld on the Rossi stocks a little better than the other guys. My cheek just lines up better, but that's depends on the size of your head and your neck and all that. So those are good guns. And there's also a pump 22 that Rossi makes. It's a copy of that Colt Lightning. That if I get another 22 rifle, I think that would be the fun one to get because I've got a great lever. And that's what I wanted to say about the Marlin 22s is everyone I've seen shoot a 22 in CAS has shot a Marlin. Has shot a Henry. The Henry company has no relationship to the Henry that made this, that this is a copy of. The Henry company started, I think, in 62 or 63. It's a totally new company that started in the 60s. But they're a great American company. They stand by their work. I had to send mine back for some work. They did it all. They repolished it because I had some scratches in it already, and no charge. And great company. And I thought out of the box it was super smooth. And there are actually a couple of gunsmiths, CAS gunsmiths, who actually work on those and make them better. So the 22 rifle, I would say just get a Marlin. Just get a Henry unless you just already have one, or if you really love the Marlin, then get the Marlin. But Henry's a great gun, and it doesn't cost a lot. It's about $350 new. The gold one is like $400 new. So that's the way to go. So we talked about the slides. Now that was the 22s and the big centerfires. The only other guns you're likely to see rifle-wise are at side matches, and I'm not really dealing with those. Long range, and some of those they use those. You'll see them on cowboy movies that the cavalry guys have, because cavalry, the U.S. Army never adopted a lever. They should have, but they never did. So you'll see some of those used for that. Make sure my notes I've covered everything. I think we did. And your big boys, we talked about the Lightning, the Marlin 94. Yeah, also we talked about the Henry 1860. Remember, that's the one that doesn't have this wood and does not have the side loader. The Henry Rifle Company that makes that 22 that I was raving about, makes the big boy that apparently doesn't work in our wood game very well, did make a run of original 1860 Henrys. And so they're just like the Alberti versions, but they're just a little nicer. So if you run into one of those and you want some style points, or you just want to have that dream firearm, the one you're shooting every week, but the one that you just shoot every couple times a year, you just like it, that's the way to go. If you like the 1860, a really good gun. And again, it's a good American company. It's good to support them. So that is our rifle breakdown. I think we kind of covered everything. The cheapest, the 92, probably the smartest long-term would just be to buy a 73, even if it means it takes a while for you to do it. And again, I'm a strong encourager of 22s. It's a great way to shoot the sport without breaking the bank all the time, because we're trying to be economical. Spend a little bit more money on the guns, get some different guns, that's fun, and then you have some guns for your friends to shoot. That would be my suggestion. Have a good one and look for those other videos.